What's up, witches? Here's a look at some bonus behind the scenes footage from this week's episode of the BetterWitch podcast. Because the idea is that, we have a lot of shows out there that are more formal interviews with witches, and those are great because you can learn about what they're working on and their next book and all of that. But I think it's nice to just hear practicing witches just have casual conversations about their lives, things that went well, things that didn't go so well, things that happened that they wish they could do better, with the idea of helping the next generation have a little bit of an easier go of it, or just do things maybe a little better than they're doing it currently or than we did in the past. So that's kind of the idea of the show.
Okay, that sounds excellent. I'm excited. I wanted to share something with you too because I thought it was so interesting. So, you know how on social media now there's like all these different people trying to impersonate us and creating fake accounts and stuff. So when you messaged me, I was like, I don't know how legit this
Yeah, I
is.
didn't even think about that.
But the funny thing is, so when I saw your name, BronxWitch, I was like, that sounds really, really familiar. And what happened was I came across your YouTube channel. I want to say maybe about a month before you sent me that message, and I watched your video on the Book of Shadows and Grimoire. And I was like, finally, somebody explains the difference between a Book of Shadows and a Grimoire. You showed how you created yours from scratch. Because I think there's a lot of people that get the two terms mixed up and they're a little confused.
And
And I've
I
watched
did.
tons. I did too for a long time, and I watched a lot of other people's videos just to get an idea of what their kind of definition of it or how they created theirs. And I feel like yours was very easy to digest for someone that's a newbie, and it was detailed and to the point, and it was accurate. And that's my big
Thank
thing.
you.
Accuracy is what's important.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I have gotten some good feedback on that video. I think mostly because I was honest with people that I was like, look, I think I was doing this backwards for a really long time. So I can't be the only person. And so that led me to learn more about the difference between the two, and like not just the technical difference, but why one might be better for you at this stage in the game than the other, etc. It made a big difference for me, so I'm glad that that video resonated with people. But yeah, I didn't even think about like you can't get a DM from a witch nowadays because you can't trust it at all. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you took a chance and responded. It really was me.
Yeah, I'm glad I did too. So this worked out.
Yes, thank you so much. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so like I said, your bio will be read at the beginning of the episode. Folks will know who you are. I think a lot of folks, if they follow me, probably already follow you, honestly, because, well, you're just great, but also because you have a YouTube presence that's been around for a long time. And my journey as a practitioner has been kind of a long one. I started when I was 12 years old, and now I'm going to be 36, so it's 20 years and change. And um, that's maybe a little bit unique for folks who are coming to witchcraft nowadays. It's a lot of new folks coming into the craft, which is fabulous. Personally, I think it's great. But for those of us who have been doing it for a little while, I think we tend to gravitate towards others who have been doing it for a little while. And so there are a lot of newer witches who have great platforms, lots of information and things like that. But I just don't follow them because I just have a tendency to gravitate towards folks who just have been practicing for some time. That's just, it's not a better thing really for me, the time thing. It's just a thing where I feel like I can connect to someone who's been doing it for a while because I've been crafting for a while. So you're one of those folks that I mention to people and will bring up in conversation and lives and things like that. So I think a lot of my followers are kind of familiar with you. But for folks who aren't, they might be really curious about your background a little bit in terms of where candle magic plays in your life. And specifically, you are one of the few people, especially in like the early days of the internet, that I could identify who had a history of practice in their family and that grew up learning these things, as opposed to many of us who are learning after the fact now from books or from the internet or whatever, wherever we can get information. very few of us have the experience of actually working side by side with our mothers, grandmothers, uncles, aunts, and learning these things firsthand. So before we even get into candle magic and all that stuff, I'm really curious about what that was like for you as a kid, because that's like a dream for many of us. So but when you're living in it, you never like what your parents are doing, and you're never as excited about it as other people are. So what was it like for you growing up in a magical household and seeing candles be lit or things being practiced that maybe other kids' moms weren't doing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So, because I was brought up in it, it was something that I can remember watching my mother do probably as far back as maybe 4 years old. I think so for me, it was normal. I really didn't know that everybody's mother didn't do this. Everybody didn't burn candles. It wasn't till I was maybe an older school age kid and went to maybe my friend's house and nobody had an altar, nobody had candles burning. So for me, it was just a way of life. It was very normal. My mother didn't necessarily label herself as a witch per se. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to sit down and do this ritual, but she did have a consistent daily practice. I remember her telling me, come sit, like come sit next to mommy, watch me dress these candles. She never necessarily forced anything on me, but I was always allowed to participate. I was always drawn to her crystals. I would want to play with her tarot cards, and I would sit and watch when she's putting oils in the candles and praying over them and lighting them at her altar. And it was something that we did every single day. Before we left the house, she would say a prayer for protection. Before, we come home or before we go to bed, she'd sit at her altar. So she was very dedicated to it. And it went on my entire childhood. I remember some of my earliest memories are going into the Botanica with her. And she also worked with clients. So she did readings. She taught clients how to burn their own candles in thick situations in their life. So going to the candle store again it was like going to the grocery store.
Right.
Looking back as an adult, now I'm like, yeah, I didn't have a typical childhood per se. Where most little girls are playing with Barbie dolls, I was playing with tarot cards.
Right.
So and I did have a childhood, but it was very different. And the other kind of part to that is my mother also exposed me to a lot of different religions outside of just spirituality because she had friends from all walks of life. Despite her practice, she was very open. So she had friends that were Catholic, she had friends that were Muslim, she had friends that were Jewish. So I've been to Catholic Mass, I've been to the Islamic temples. I've been to the Krishna temple with Hindus and Buddhism, and she really wanted to expose me early so I could make my own kind of decision as to what feels right to my spirit. And I feel like, when I look at spirituality in a whole and even religion, they all have their own set of magical workings. They all burn candles. It could be labeled a little bit different, but to me, it's still some sort of spiritual practice. So coming full circle, it's just in my blood, just burning candles. I guess nowadays in like modern magic, people want to label, is it hoodoo? Is it voodoo? Is it witchcraft? Is it manifestation? All this stuff, right? All these different terms for what's really a umbrella type practice. So for me, I just call it magic. Magic is magic. I mean, even my grandmother did not label herself as a witch, but she had her white candles. She had her journal that she used to always tell me when I was very young. Anything you want to manifest, just write it down, like spirit will hear you and it'll come. She worked with a Bible. So again, it wasn't hoodoo, it was prayer time. It was come sit down, light this candle, write out the things that you want. So again, it was just very normal for me. I don't know any other way. It's literally a lifestyle now. Like there's no day that my candles aren't lit. I don't take time and spend at my altar. And it's just, I'm very grateful because it's followed me from childhood to now and has opened up a lot of opportunities and avenues and just things for my growth spiritually and just as a woman. And I have to say, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to have had a teacher and someone to really hold my hand and teach me from a little girl up until now as a woman how to practice magic.
Yeah, and I really love that you talk about that being an umbrella term. I was just filming with Valerie Love, Reverend Valerie Love. She is a Christian witch and has the Christian Witch podcast. And we were talking a little bit about what you have just brought up, which is that there are a lot of magical practices in our families, in our communities, and even in our religions that don't seem to be based in magic. If we look carefully enough, we'll see a lot of these things like lighting candles. And I would say that candle work is probably one of those universal practices that, along with prayer, that I think you see really all over the world, and all different types of traditions, whether they're magic based or not.
It's interesting because I had a girlfriend do a ritual for me because we do spells for each other, and I had her do a ritual for me, and I was dealing with some health stuff, and it was just like, I need to find the right resource. Sometimes it's hard to find the right doctor, the right whatever it is that you need. And I went into an appointment for something totally different, and I ended up having a conversation with a gentleman that was a physician. And he actually specialized in the exact thing that I was trying to figure out. Okay, how am I going to heal my body from this? And this man in this waiting room did know me from Adam, gave me like, do this, do this, do this. This is what you need. This is the doctor you need. This, and I knew, no, undoubtedly, I'm like,
Right.
that came from her ritual.
Right.
Period, point blank. What are
Clearly.
the odds that I meet someone sitting next to me in a waiting room who's a doctor that literally gave me a whole consultation and answered all my questions that I was struggling to figure out on my own.
Wow.
So the candle, it didn't heal me, but it gave me the resources in the direction to heal myself. So that's how I would say in that regard how it would work. Other than that, I really do feel like candles they can manifest almost anything. You know, you can't light a candle for a gender of your child or anything like that. But for the most part, a candle can really bring about change, or if at best, lead you in the right direction to get what it is that you need. So nothing's really off limits to me. And if you walk into a botanica nowadays, there's literally a candle for almost everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the botanicas because they are a great resource for candles, and there are online resources as well for candles. But the candle world might be a little overwhelming for the newbie, especially now. You know, you have different materials and you have folks with very strong opinions about those different materials. You must use beeswax, it's natural, you know, try soy, you must pour your own, you can buy them, etc. And so yeah, I can totally feel that actually because, you know, beeswax candles, I love them. Like, I mean, who doesn't? And I like I've seen people get creative with like you know, pulling them apart and putting things on the inside and rolling them back up. And like, there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with beeswax. For whatever reason, beeswax candles to me seem like Bath and Body Works though. I don't know. It's just a personal thing. Whenever I go to work magic, it aesthetically has too much of like a pretty vibe to it, I think. And so I'm like, no. I need a little bit more down and rusty kind of a candle that looks like it's like doing some work. So your personal connection can also kind of have a role in the right kind of candle for you, is what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. I mean, like if we go back to the Botanica and you can walk into the section of like the money and prosperity, you will easily find 10 different candles. And they're all labeled fast luck, triple luck, horseshoe, money drawing. They're really all for the same thing, but they're labeled differently. They have different symbols on them. Even though I know I could pick up any one of those candles and do a money spell, if I don't feel drawn to it, if I look at that candle and the images feel off-putting to me, then it's going to bother my spirit. I'm not going to feel connected to the candle, and my ritual is probably not going to be as successful that it could have been, if it even works at all. I have experimented with candles, brought them home, dressed them, prayed over them, lit them, looked at them for 2 days on my altar, took them and chucked them out. They just didn't feel good. I could feel like if I look at you and I don't like you, it's not going to work.
Right. Thank you, witches, for checking out the behind the scenes footage from this week's episode. Tune into YouTube every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern for a new episode, and definitely join us right after that episode airs for a Coven-only live Q&A with our guest co-host. And make sure to leave a review of the BetterWitch podcast on your favorite podcast platform. See you next time. Blessed be.